Alright, how's it going, y'all? So today we're comparing UGREEN to Synology. Is the up-and-coming new NAS operating system from UGREEN able to fully unthrone Synology, which has been the undisputed market champion of the NAS world? This is all about new scalability, ultra-high performance, and Synology is really all about dependency, ease of use, and just long-term reliability. And we're going to be looking at what is right for you, and can the new UGREEN OS really unthrone the king? All right, so UGREEN is a pretty much new NAS operating system. It's only come out for the past year or so, where they've really been shipping units and been getting more and more mass market appeal. And it comes in a very pretty box and is built very well. Synology is the tried and true option. However, Synology is locking down their units more and more. Synology is requiring their drives on all 2025 and beyond units, which is really changing the landscape for them. They are really aiming for businesses now, and so can UGREEN come in and really be the best option for your home labbers? And so that's what we're going to be comparing today and really looking at them. I bought both of these units with my own money. This is actually my Synology DS718 Plus that I bought really long time ago. It is a 8-year-old unit now, I believe. And this is a UGREEN 2-bay unit that I bought off of Amazon with my own money. Disclosure, Synology has sent me a lot of units in the past. I just happen to have bought this one. And I have a lot more experience with Synology DSM than I do with UGREEN. Neither one of these companies have ever sent me any money, however, and they don't get to see any of this before it goes live. So UGREEN is a company that has pretty much started this NAS off Kickstarter, and they have units going all the way up from 2 bays all the way up to 8 bays. Currently pretty much all of this kind of same form factor, and they're built very well. Their really big selling point is the hardware out of the box is very powerful. Across the board, while Synology and UGREEN have actually very similar price points for most of their models, you will find the majority of your UGREEN units are just going to have much more powerful modern CPUs and higher amounts of RAM. And so really UGREEN is aiming for, hey, we're going to give you what Synology is giving you at higher performance with no hard drive lock-ins. UGREEN also differs from Synology in that it actually allows you to install any operating system you want on this box. Synology, the reason you buy a Synology NAS is the operating system. So I don't see anybody doing that anytime soon. Synology runs Synology DSM. UGREEN runs UGOS Pro. I think they need to kind of rework that operating system name. And while UGREEN's operating system is a lot newer, it actually still has quite a few features in there, and it's done very well. Making a brand new NAS operating system from the ground up is not an easy task, and UGREEN actually has done a very good job with it. They just honestly copied all of Synology's designs and layouts and everything, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're familiar with Synology, running through UGREEN is actually going to be very easy. It's very funny. Every once in a while, there's a couple of menus that are in a slightly different place. It's like, oh, right, this is not Synology DSM. But for the most part, UGREEN is aiming to provide what Synology does at a higher performance tier with just overall more freedom and higher throughput systems at not too much more money than Synology. If you look at their units, every single one of your UGREENs that compares directly to Synology is going to be more powerful. It's going to have more RAM, more CPU, and probably a faster networking speed. They're going to be about the same price, and in a couple of cases a little bit more. When you go into your larger 8-bay units, they do become more expensive than Synology's models, but not by a significant amount. And UGREEN is not going to force you to use anything. You can put in whatever you want on here, and if it breaks, it breaks. It's really set up where, hey, it's on you. You can do whatever you want with a unit, even install TrueNAS on it. Whereas with Synology, with the 2025 models, as I said, they require their own hard drives and everything. It is really a tightly knit package where now it's essentially that Apple system. You buy it and you do it the Synology way if you're going that path. whereas UGREEN is that home lab tinker that Synology actually originally started out as, hey, this is the base operating system and it can do most things, but we're also going to give you total control to do pretty much anything else you want to with it. All right, so that is the base overview of these two systems. And I want to start off by saying both of these units actually have a market share that they're going to be best at. UGREEN is really going to be great for your home labbers and the tinkers who want to be able to upgrade things, play around with things, run things exactly how they want to, and really know more about computers and know how to set up stuff themselves and want to tinker. Synology is kind of the opposite. They are going to be old reliable. If you are not looking for a massive file server, so if you're not looking to deploy drives that are greater than 16 terabytes, and you need a high performance, highly reliable file system that's a NAS, Synology is going to be very hard to beat. UGREEN just is not quite there yet. Their operating system is phenomenal, but really missing some key things. Namely, a few key packages like a VPN server that you can actually run off of your user authentication, as well as snapshots. I do not know why UGREEN does not have BTRFS snapshots yet. They say it's coming in the next 12 months. But to me, when you're developing a NAS operating system, that's the first thing you do. That is the first thing that the UNAS Pro did. It had very few features. It did not have NFS. It didn't have anything. It had snapshots though. And I personally think that's the right path. UGREEN instead decided to go the more flashy route where, hey, look at your phone apps, look at the ability to have photos, look at this, look at this. That's kind of more media stuff, but I don't know why it was not on their priority list to incorporate snapshots. That's honestly something that bothers me. Even when it is added, the fact that they didn't have that as their initial priority just says that they're not as worried about data integrity and the ability to really be a file server as even like UNAS Pro was, because UNAS Pro had snapshots before they had RAID 6. Hey all, really quick update from Will from the future. UGREEN has actually just added their snapshot package on in, so they do now have that live, which is a really important step to getting a full-fledged system in my opinion. So just know for the rest of this video, UGREEN has that snapshot package that I was talking about, though I have not yet been able to test it. All right, back to the video. Synology is going to be old reliable. Synology has years and years and years of experience, and honestly, while it's boring, it is tried and true, and you're just not going to have data loss. I'm not saying that UGREEN you're going to have data loss, but there is something to be said for deploying in a massive market, that something has been around for as long as Synology versus something that's new. Pretty much any issue that's come up is going to have already been resolved with Synology, whereas UGREEN, there's going to be bumps along the way because they are breaking things and they are moving fast. Once again, it's not a bad thing, and especially a year from now, it's probably going to be a very different story. They're putting a ton of effort into it, but if you're just looking for something dependable, I do think you're still going to have to look at Synology for now, just because of all the years of experience they've got, as well as the rich ecosystem that surrounds it, from backups, snapshots, everything you really need to have a full-blown Office file server. All right, so now from a build quality perspective, they're both built very well. This is obviously one of Synology's much older units, so it's got a slightly different design now, but honestly, these UGREENs are built really nice metal case, locking front chassis, totally toolless design, where I think it's actually easier to understand how these work. They've done a lot of great things setting up their actual units, and from a hardware perspective, there's nothing here that's lacking. These units are built beautifully. They've got a lot of very smart design things in there, and they have spent a ton of R&D money building a beautiful, high quality NAS unit. And honestly, I think I like the build look and overall quality more than I like even the new Synology units, if that is important to you. And as I said at the beginning, across the board, when you're looking at UNAS, you're going to get a better CPU and probably more RAM and probably faster networking than your comparable Synology NAS. And that's really UGREEN's selling point. Really, those are the things, plus no hard drive lock-in. Those are the pieces they are trying to sell you on to get you to break away from the market champion of Synology. And so if those things are important to you, that is where it starts to matter. And for most people, where that is going to matter is what you're trying to do with it. Pretty much all Synologies you buy are going to have enough performance to run a very solid Office file server and be able to do pretty much everything that normal people do. Photos and things like that are really going to be phenomenal on Synology, and you're not going to notice the CPU too much. Synology is not going to sell you the latest and greatest. Synology is going to sell you a 6-year-old CPU in your NAS, and that's actually in a lot of ways fine. For most people, you're probably not going to notice with that. However, UGREEN is going to give you that super fast new CPU, DDR5 RAM, everything cutting edge. But other than just looking at pure specs, having used both of these units, it doesn't really matter. If you're not somebody who's running a bunch of Docker containers, virtual machines, and things along that line, your CPU is probably not going to matter. As long as it's fast enough to be a NAS, you're not going to notice. If you're talking about an Office file server, or even just running things like photo backups and stuff like that, your CPU does not matter very much. Synology CPUs on all their new units are more than fast enough to handle 10 gigabit network throughput, which is the key thing about a NAS. However, for people who are looking to run a ton of Docker containers, who are looking to run virtual machines, and are looking to do hardware transcoding in Plex, that is where UGREEN is going to shine. Most of their units, I think if not all of their units, have what's called an Intel QuickSync compatible CPU. This is a CPU with a GPU on there, which means that when you're using Plex, an app to see video streams, it is able to use that built-in GPU to hardware transcode video files. So something that will cripple a CPU is trivially done on even a very low powered GPU. And so that is another one of those places where UGREEN is going to shine. If you're trying to build a high performance Plex server with hardware transcoding, UGREEN is going to win hands down because the CPUs on Synology NASs do not have Intel QuickSync anymore. Only a few of them do. And so it is going to be run circles around by UGREEN. But other than that, those are the only times that really your CPU and your RAM really matter. But let's talk about what actually matters, and that is the actual operating system and day in and day out. So I'm going to go ahead and hook these guys on up, and we're going to check out and give a tour of the two operating systems and see what features are there and what is missing, and quite frankly, how similar they are. All right, so now I've just plugged in the two units, and we have their two web interfaces up. And by the way, I switched over to a 1522 Plus for Synology. It doesn't really matter, but it's just when I had Arden OS installed. And we can take a look at the remarkably similar interfaces in between the two boxes. As I said, UGREEN more or less copied Control Panel directly from Synology in the layout and so many other things. If we look through them, they are incredibly similar. They moved around a couple of the pieces, but for the most part, the identical settings are in both locations. So for the most part, what is basically Synology's single greatest strength in the NAS industry, which is their really great DSM user interface, UGREEN more or less copied. They took all that really ease of use and fast menu operations and added it here, and the menu is incredibly fast and responsive, which is something that even it beats out, I think, Synology DSM in terms of just pure responsiveness. They both have a package center, UGREEN calls it the app center, that overall operate pretty similarly. So I'd say most people can get used to using either one of these pretty easily. I know DSM like the back of my hand. I literally use it in German sometimes, and I was beginning German because I just deal with it day in and day out. And I very, very, very quickly picked up on UGREEN's interface because it's so similar. It's actually very funny. Every once in a while, there's one or two menu items that are in a different place, and I get very confused before I realize it's not Synology DSM. So let's talk about a couple of the key features that are still deciding factors between UGREEN and Synology from an actual software perspective. First off, it's got to be media. So UGREEN has their own theater application, and Synology no longer has a first-party media application. They used to have what was called Video Station, and they completely removed it in DSM 7.2. And so you can no longer download it, and you can't even update to 7.2 if you've got it. Now, one thing Synology does have that UGREEN does not as of this date is a first-party Plex client. So I can come in here and I can directly install Plex Media Server and Tailscale, which are two really common applications to install directly on the NAS without having to go through and do anything through Docker. UGREEN, as of this date, does not have a first-party Plex app or a Tailscale app. Both of these can be deployed in Docker. However, that does require a fair amount more configuration and understanding to actually being able to do it. It's not impossible, but it's definitely not easy. Whereas installing Plex on a Synology, where it has a couple little quirks, is still very, very, very easy to do. And especially with GPU pass-through, it is so much easier. When you're using Plex with Docker, you have to make sure to pass the GPU from the actual operating system to Plex as a Docker container, which adds a lot of complexity. So that's a really key difference between the two of them. However, I will say UGREEN's only been at this like a year. A whole lot more is coming, and I'm sure Plex will be deploying a UGREEN specific binary because honestly, this is all just running Linux under the hood. It should not be that hard for them to package it in there and give that nice first party support. Then both of them run Docker. On UGREEN, Docker is just called Docker. On Synology DSM, Docker is called Container Manager. But both of them can be installed and run, and pretty much that gives you the ability to run almost anything under the sun because Docker is pretty much compatible with everything. Synology does have a fairly old Linux kernel, so there's a couple of things that actually do give you trouble trying to run in Container Manager on Synology DSM, but for the most part, you can work around just about anything. So realistically, pretty much anything you want to be able to do, you should be able to do within Docker. However, that comes with a large amount of complexity that most just new users probably don't necessarily want to dip their toes into unless you're really trying to learn and kind of go down that home lab and be able to deploy your own services and things like that. There are a couple of other key missing applications from UGREEN, and the number one is any kind of snapshot. I've already said a couple times in this video, but two really key things that UGREEN is missing before it's really ready for prime time is going to be a way to easily do PTRFS snapshots and a easy to deploy VPN server, both of which are key pieces to deploying a NAS as a actual like operating system for an office, and snapshots are so useful. I will say UGREEN has a very solid backup application. It's not super feature rich yet, but there are really two different ways you can back up UGREEN to another device. There is this sync and backup application, which actually allows you to also back up your computer to it. Obviously, if you're on macOS, you can also just use Time Machine. But you can also go in and with the new update, they have the ability to back up between storage pools. What between storage pools means for you is you can easily do what I did and install a USB thumb drive or external drive within the device and automatically have it backed up every single day. So you can see I've got this backup job that automatically backs everything on up to that drive. So if my main NAS fails, I have a clean backup of it. RAID is not a backup. It's really important to always have a backup of your files, and UGREEN now makes that easy to do. You can also back it up to an rsync or a WebDAV server. I would also love to see an S3 compatible target here just so you can go to like Backblaze or something, but these are two great places to start. And they also have this sync application with cloud drives. So you can actually back up to Google Drive or OneDrive by syncing your files to Google Drive or OneDrive. And there's ways you can actually just do a single upload task, which I think is actually pretty cool, or do a full-blown sync task and hook up to it. So there's definitely a lot there that UGREEN has going for it. They have the majority of the key features in, and it's pretty well set up. We can see that they've got a solid logging system, and they also give you nice clean metrics off of exactly what everything's going on, which honestly is really useful. So you can just see, hey, Is one of my disks going bad because it's got a crazy utilization rate versus everything else? And just seeing what's going on with the CPU and GPU. It's really nice having a clean interface like this. However, I don't see any way yet to store previous values. It's always nice to be able to go in and see old values. Now, one last thing that I think UGREEN is still missing, and that is notifications within their internal system. So currently, UGREEN does not have any way to get email notifications, and I think that's a big miss right now. They do have a first-party mobile app that will send you notifications if it's all hooked up. But I really think that something they need to do is sit down and at least give it so you can send SMTP emails to your own email account if you've got your own SMTP mail server. And there's times where maybe the disk is degraded, and you just need to know that so you don't wait months before realizing that a disk has been failing. This is the time that people lose data from RAID systems a lot of time, is they have no clue and nobody ever set up mail notifications, and so drives are just dying in the background without anybody ever coming in and checking. And so I think that's another really big thing that UGREEN does not yet have to make it worth it. Another thing from my experience setting this up with clients, by the way, you can hire me if you want to, there's a link for that down in the description below, is I have found on the 8-bay unit, it doesn't quite perform as fast as you would expect it to with the hard drives. If you load it up with SSDs, it's ripping fast. You're not going to have any trouble with that. But I have found slightly lackluster performance, and I think there's a bit of a connection bottleneck to the hard drives from the actual NAS itself. I'm guessing that there's probably just some streamlining that needs to be done, but we had a system with 24 terabyte Iron Wolf drives, 8 of them in a RAID 6 configuration, and they were completely empty and the RAID had already synced, and we were only getting about like 650, 700 megabytes per second transfer rate. Now, the system is easily capable of more than that, and we were seeing that the disk utilization was actually what was slowing it down. And with 8 drives in RAID 6 configuration, especially with new high quality drives that are very empty, you should be able to saturate that 10 gigabit connection, at least get up to the 900 range. So that's just one anecdotal thing I have seen. I installed SSDs in this particular unit, and it has been ripping fast. It has saturated the network connection on the back of it without any trouble whatsoever. Had macOS pinned right at 300 megabytes per second, which is always great to see. So it definitely has the compute for it. There's just a little bit of tuning that probably needs to be done. Another thing that UGREEN does do that Synology does not is the actual operating system is not running off of the same drives as the data pool. So the way Synology actually installs the operating system is it actually takes a stripe and installs it across every single one of your drives in your system, and that is the boot drive. It's a tiny little RAID 1 stripe that is the operating system. So the problem with that is if your drives are hit heavy, your operating system starts slowing down, and vice versa. If it's doing heavy writes on the operating system, well, now your drives are starting to actually slow down as well, so the storage pool. This has a little internal 32 gigabyte card, and on the larger units, it's 128 gigabyte SSD. That actually is what is booted from, and so it is isolated and separated out, which does mean that there's more performance left over for the drives. And it also means you can install any operating system you want on this system because at the end of the day, it's just a computer. You can go ahead and there's an HDMI port on the back of it that lets you do everything. So that's the overview between these two systems. Now, I will say there's a lot of stuff that Synology has as well that I just didn't get a chance to talk about here. Things like Active Backup for Business, Active Backup for MS365, and Google Workspace are unbelievably powerful and useful and license-free as of this time, which makes Synology an incredibly compelling option. There's a lot of other stuff like that that Synology has because of its legacy that we just didn't get a chance to talk about here. But when we're going over the key features that most small businesses and home users will look at, they actually are surprisingly compatible. And while UGREEN is newer on the scene and therefore is not as robust, I've had no major issues with this system yet, which is pretty impressive. All right, well, that's going to be it for this. If you want to hire me, there's a link for that down in the description below. And leave your thoughts down in the comments below. And have a good one. Bye.